Good afternoon. I'd like to welcome you to the Lethbridge City Council meeting for Tuesday, September the 8th. I'm going to begin with the reconciliation statement. The City of Lethbridge acknowledges that we are gathered on the lands of the Blackfoot people of the Canadian Plains and pays respect to the Blackfoot people past, present, and future, while recognizing and respecting their cultural heritage, beliefs, and relationships to the land. The City of Lethbridge is also home to the Métis Nation of Alberta, Region Number 3. We'll now move on to bouquets. I'll start with Councillor Morrow if he's there, or shall we do the roll call first?
Councillor Campbell.
Here.
Councillor Carlson. Councillor Crowson.
Here.
Councillor Higgin.
Here.
Councillor Morrow. Councillor Morrow. Councillor Mirashiro.
Sorry, I'm here.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Mirashiro. I think he's going to remote in shortly, Councillor Mirashiro. Acting Mayor Parker.
Here.
Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Here.
Mayor Spearman.
Here.
Thank you.
Okay, we'll now move on to bouquets. Councillor Morrow, do you have any bouquets?
Nope.
Councillor Crowson?
None for me, thanks.
Councillor Higgin?
None, thank you.
Acting Mayor Parker?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I appreciate that. My applause to all the people in the community who have been patient through all the wonderful road construction. I mean, there's a lot of good things happening in our community. To all the people that use University Drive. University Drive is coming close to an end, and it looks really great, Mr. Hawkins. I know we have a great contractor working on that. And I just want to remind all the parents to drive safely through all the school zones, school's back in. And I wish all the best to our post-secondary institutions and to all our other schools within the city. I hope they have a safe and a great school year.
Thank you. Councillor Higgin?
Yes, sorry, I did want to just give a hearty welcome to our new police chief, Chief Medizada. He started here last week, was sworn in on August the 31st, and so we just wanted to welcome him to our community, and we look forward to working together with him.
Thank you. Councillor Miyashiro?
Yes, Mayor Spearman, can you hear me?
Yep.
1 second, I have to find an email for my... 1 second. Am I the last one? Mayor Spearman, I'd like to send bouquets out to our assessment team, and that's Mr. Laverty and his team that has won an international award. And I'll just read it out to you really quickly. Sorry about this, I wasn't ready for us to start. I'll find it in a second here. Maybe I won't.
We might go to Councillor Campbell, and then we'll come back to you.
Come back to me. Thanks.
Councillor Campbell?
I have nothing, thanks.
Okay. Okay. Deputy Mayor Kaufman?
I have nothing either, and I'm trying to think of a very long way to say that so that Councillor Miyashiro can find his email.
I can't find the email.
Okay.
1 second. Sorry, guys.
I just resent you the email, so just check your first email from me.
Yeah, is that it? Hang on a second. Sorry, you guys. Did you say you just sent it, Belinda?
Sorry, it must have went through. I'll try to find. Sorry.
Sorry, I had it set up on my computer earlier.
Yes, he is in his office.
Yeah, I don't see this one. Sorry. So what the assessment team has won is International Award for Community Engagement. And what they've done is worked with some community organizations to help recognize when people are in trouble and if they need interventions from social organizations. For example, if people are in arrears in their paying their property taxes, and the property assessors make contact and they realize that there may be something wrong with that household, they will contact various community helping organizations such as Lethbridge Elder Abuse Response Network or the CMHA or the Hoarding Task Force, and to help the people not lose their homes, and to work out a way that you can either get perpetrators of elder abuse out of the homes. That one of the reasons people can't pay sometimes is because of mental illness or because someone's stealing all their money. So a big tribute to Mr. Laverty and his team for working with our social helping organizations, and congratulations for winning the prestigious international award.
Well done. Quick. Certainly kudos from all members of council, Mr. Laverty. Thank you. I have a bouquet going out to individuals and community organizations that are helping those who are struggling with COVID. There are families who are struggling with income issues, kids going back to school, needing supplies. Everyone who's donating to organizations to assist people in the city who have been negatively affected by COVID is my bouquet this week. So thanks to all who really care about others in their community. With that, we'll move on to the agenda. First resolution is from Deputy Mayor Kaufman. It's the consent agenda. Be it resolved that the minutes of the regular meeting of City Council held Monday, August the 24th, 2020 be approved, and that the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that the minutes of the public hearing held August 24th, 2020 be approved, and that the Mayor and the City Clerk be authorized to sign the same. And further be it resolved that City Council receive for information the status of directed resolutions. And further be it resolved that City Council authorize that Gerald Dwornik receive the unclaimed currency of $200. And further be it resolved that City Council give first reading to the following bylaws. Bylaw 6240, Electronic Transmission of Assessment and Taxation Documents Bylaw. And Bylaw 6243, authorizing City Council to borrow $17,824,000 for the expansion and renovation of the Lethbridge and District Exhibition, Agri-Food Hub, Trade Centre, pursuant to the Capital Improvement Program D-42, and Bylaw 6244, authorizing City Council to borrow $8 million for the expansion and renovation of the Lethbridge and District Exhibition, Agri-Food Hub, Trade Centre, pursuant to Capital Improvement Program D-42, and Bylaw 6247, authorizing City Council to lend money to the Lethbridge and District Exhibition, a non-profit organization for the expansion and renovation of an agri-food hub, Trade Centre. Bylaw 6246, amendment to Bylaw 5411, the procedure bylaw. And okay, it stops before the end. Deputy Mayor Kaufman?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Actually, I'm glad it stopped before the end because I don't have anything else on my list. Just wanted to point out to members of council, we have the three bylaws pertaining to the Lethbridge and District Exhibition Agri-Food Hub Trade Centre. 6447 is the loan agreement bylaw for 30-year borrowing. 6243 is the $17.824 million. This is what the city is borrowing on behalf of the Lethbridge exhibition. This is what they are paying back over the 30 years. And then bylaw 6244 is the $8 million borrowing, which is part of the $25 million that City Council has committed to this project. This is an initial borrowing that helps some of the preliminary aspects of the construction, and it gives our treasurer and our staff the time to figure out how we're going to acquire the additional funds, whether it be through grants or other methods. If there are no other questions, call the question.
Okay, question has been called. There are no other questions. All in favor? Any opposed? That's unanimous. Thank you. Adoption of the agenda from Acting Mayor Parker, that the agenda of the regular City Council meeting of September the 8th, 2020 be adopted as presented, including all communications as submitted by the City Clerk. Acting Mayor Parker?
Madam City Clerk, any adjustments?
There are no additions to the agenda or revisions. Thank you.
Seeing none, Mr. Mayor, I just call the question.
Okay, question has been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. Thank you. Okay, we'll move forward to our first presentation. I'm going to invite Mr. Scott Grieco, Transit Operations Manager, forward to speak to us about Transit on Demand. Mr. Grieco.
Your Worship, if I could just provide a brief intro to Scott's presentation. Just to remind councillors of the two transit KPMG recommendations that have come forward to council before. One was to implement an on-demand transit system to achieve efficiencies, and the second was to implement and enforce eligibility criteria for accessorides. So what transit and what we're here today to put before council is information on those two things. Transit has looked quite broadly in terms of efficiencies, not just limited its thinking specifically to these KPMG recommendations, but what we're really looking for today is a council decision, yes or no, to proceed or not proceed with these, so we can keep the operational review train moving, if you will, and can move to implementation and onto other recommendations. So certainly not. We're open to any discussion, thoughts, questions on transit, but specifically today we're looking for those two decisions from council.
Okay. Please proceed.
Good afternoon, Mayor Spearman and members of council. Next. For our transit team, the KPMG Fiscal and Operational Review has been an informative process that uncovered opportunities to optimize our transit system by piloting an on-demand transit system. Next. Today is about picking a path and arriving at a decision on which option to move forward with. Next. In 2017, we had a total of 14 engagement sessions through the Transit Master Plan. The TMP supported moving from a coverage model to more of a ridership model by implementing a routing system called CityLink. CityLink streamlines the design of our transit system. In 2019, the KPMG review looked to achieve efficiencies and savings. And so we have come to this intersection of efficiency and savings while still delivering on the customer experience. Next. Transit on Demand is a relatively new concept. The properties we researched did not implement Transit on Demand as a cost savings initiative, as it has a threshold. It often results in both ridership growth and enhanced transit options for customers. We know at certain times we have high and low demand routes. Transit on Demand leverages technology as a solution for our ridership challenges. Next. KPMG estimated Transit on Demand would save $1.9 million. We don't know the actual cost savings until we pilot a Transit on Demand system with CityLink. In our analysis of the pilot project, we estimate $1 million in savings over 3 years. Next. Transit on Demand books rides and schedules buses using dynamic routing software. Some of the benefits are expansion into new service areas, increased ridership, and reduction of travel times. The most common theme, it complements conventional transit by allowing properties to be flexible with routing and scheduling. Next. This map illustrates transit on demand after 7 p.m. in low density and low ridership areas of the community. Customers have the option for enhanced service in outlying areas by using transit on demand to connect onto CityLink. Next. Let's go for a ride now to see it in action. Let's watch what this looks like for a customer booking a trip from the university to City Hall from an actual transit on demand service provider. It's an intuitive process of booking a trip. Specify a pickup location. In this case, we will choose the university as our pickup location, and then we will select City Hall as our drop-off location. Customers have the ability to book trips on behalf of others. The ride is confirmed real time. The app allows users to view their bus. For Lethbridge, Transit on Demand would allow us to target areas of the community that have low demand at certain times and get them onto a newly designed CityLink conventional transit system. Next. Option 1 incorporates East Side CityLink with Transit on Demand with a reduction in frequency after 10 p.m. from 30 minutes to 60 minutes. Option 2 combines Transit on Demand with CityLink on the west side. Of course, we can implement different combinations to enhance expenditure reductions. Transit would implement the pilot for 1 year and report on the actual cost savings. Next. As a separate exercise, we completed an expenditure reduction model of 5 and 10%. One important thing to consider with these two options, it will increase the travel time for riders who rely on transit for work, school, and other transportation requirements. Next. Let's now review how a rider could be affected going from Walmart North to McMaster Boulevard West using the same trip across 3 different models. Our current system takes 1 hour and 20 minutes. Transit on Demand and CityLink is 55 minutes, and using an expenditure reduction model takes 1 hour and 50 minutes. The rider saves 25 minutes over the current system and 55 minutes over the expenditure reduction model, along with 2 less transfers. Next. So who will this impact? Approximately 12% of our overall ridership after 7 p.m. As seen in Transit's ridership data, we illustrate the reduction in ridership. Our impact assessment shows of the 7,400 rides per day, only 1,000 riders would be impacted. Next. Transit on Demand will complement the conventional CityLink frequent transit network with an estimated $353,000 per year in cost savings. In closing, this is our recommendation. I will open it up for questions. Thank you.
Okay. We'll start with Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Mr. Greco, for the presentation, the information. The 400-meter policy regarding our bus stops, this is, I do believe it is a city policy. Is this taken into consideration or is part of the recommendation to actually change the stop distance the distance between stops?
Thank you for your question. The 400-meter stop distance, we are not proposing a change in the stop distance. What Transit on Demand will provide for customers is enhanced options for the customer. So for example, you may be able to be picked up within a certain distance. Within that distance, you would also have the option, if you wanted, to walk over the 400 meters to hop onto the CityLink. So it's providing customers with an enhanced option. So we can still sustain that 400 meter. That 400 meter distance is a very standard distance across the transit properties. But if customers want options and we want to increase our ridership, Transit on Demand provides those options because you may be willing to walk a little bit further to get onto those CityLink roads.
Thank you, although does the 400 meters still not confine us to certain behaviors? Would it not be more liberating or provide greater flexibility if we stepped aside from that policy?
Most of the CityLink routes are within 86% of the CityLink. So when we looked at where our customers were, the CityLink routing system, 86% of our customers are within reach of the CityLink. So there are areas of the city where you may have to walk a little bit further to catch CityLink. Those options would not degrade the level of service or the efficiency that we would have.
Oh, okay, thank you. When you say are within reach or within distance, what parameter were used there? Is that the 400 meters, or is that within 800 meters, a kilometer?
That's correct. That would be within your 400 meters. And so what ends up happening is you actually have the option to walk a little bit further if you want to reduce your travel time. So the majority, 95% of our bus stops are within, 95% are within the 400 meter. 5% of those bus stops are outside of those parameters. And so you would basically have the option to walk a little bit further if you wanted to save travel time.
Thank you. Final question on your presentation. You say only 1,000 riders would be challenged by moving to a new system. Is the thought that we would lose those riders altogether then?
Actually, the thought around the 12% is that those 12% that are impacted would actually have the option to actually hop on a transit on-demand bus and actually go on to the CityLink from there. And so you would have enhanced options. So of the people that were impacted, the majority of those impacts are a positive impact.
Oh, excellent. Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Acting Mayor Parker.
Thank you very much. Thanks, Ms. Greco, for your presentation. My question to you is, first of all, I really like, it's almost like the Uber of buses. In actuality, you're going to be able to see the bus coming and all that. That's totally cool. I think that's a sidebar. I think it's really interesting. It makes things a lot easier for people. In regards to the savings, now, in theory, that's the savings. Are you going to review it after 1 year and come back to council to see what was the true savings, or do you know that's going to be for sure the savings?
Yeah, that's one thing we don't know is the exact cost savings. We have estimated those cost savings of $353,000, but until we actually implement the Transit On Demand pilot project and combine those CityLink routes with the modifications to those routes, then we could come back to council with a more realistic actual cost savings.
And thank you, and I appreciate that. So if this is supported today, maybe it's in your presentation, I just didn't see it here. When does it go into effect? Is it January 1st? Or when would you be starting this?
We would, if approved, we would begin with an RFP process and begin looking for an on-demand provider. And within the year, we feel that we could implement it and then come back to council with those changes.
You don't have a target date. It's just a matter, it depends on how the request for proposals, all that kind of goes.
Yeah, it would be approximately 1 year.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Higgin.
Thank you. You spoke about this model here to be 7 p.m. till midnight, so the after hours. So have you thought about why we would not possibly change that to all non-peak hours? So say, for example, we've got a 10 to 2, we have weekends, holidays, etc., because we've seen some savings here. Would that be something that would be looked into as well then? Because we've got 7 till midnight, but how about the other times that we could work this great system as what it's been presented?
That's truly the benefit of doing the pilot project, especially with the uncertainty with COVID and the ridership uncertainty that we have. If we're able to pilot an on-demand system, we'd be able to analyze those other ridership areas and possibly come up with solutions. With the data that we looked at, we simply found that with the data that we had, that 7 to midnight, with that drop in ridership, that we'd be able to better allocate our resources.
So with the previous way, we kind of had an on-demand reservation system before here. How was that received?
So we had some wins and we had some losses. The transit by reservation system itself that transit had set up during COVID was actually, it was a very, very manual process. So we had set up a call center. The purpose of the technology and the enhanced reason to implement the technology is that you're able to book those rides in real time. And so you remove all those administrative redundancies by having the technology. The other big benefit of the technology, had we had it, we would have been able to turn on and off transit on demand. So if ridership plummeted, like we saw during COVID, we would be able to turn a transit on demand system on and then revert back. The transit by reservation system, we were incapable of performing that.
Kind of an on-demand, but obviously quite a bit different by the looks of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Thank you.
Okay, are there any further questions from council?
I have some, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, Councillor Morrow?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Mr. Greco, just to follow up to your reply to Councillor Parker, you indicated, I thought you said you're going to put out an RFP to see who's going to deliver or be the provider of on-demand. What does that mean? Aren't we, Lethbridge Transit, going to be providing that service?
Yes, thank you for your question, Councillor Morrow. So to clarify that, the actual RFP would go out to a number of on-demand service providers. Lethbridge Transit would remain delivering that service. So the RFP would go out to a number of different on-demand transit service providers.
I'm sorry, I don't understand what that means.
Scott, you're talking about
Software.
software, right?
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking software.
Yeah.
Okay, sorry, I didn't realize you were talking software. Okay, thank you. So you talked about proposing the CityLink route, which is a realignment of the current routes, 12, the University City Center one, and then 23 and 24, which is north-south clockwise and counterclockwise. As far as I know, these are what we would be considered, and I don't know if I have the right lingo, but bi-directional routes with 30-minute frequency. So what does alignment mean, and how does the realignment impact the current service model and frequency?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Morrow. When we're talking about realignment, we are making certain amendments to routes that straighten our routes and make them more efficient. So for example, when we went through the transit master plan, it was identified that we have primarily a coverage model. And so in order for transit to move forward, one of the recommendations was to implement more of a ridership model. And in doing that, you straighten the routes out and connect the city through using conventional routes. And you're able to have high frequency routes and you can build upon that system. So it's essentially having a backbone of the system.
Okay, would this on-demand service cost us money to move forward with? And the reason I'm asking that is because in your slide, in your presentation, you say transit on demand is typically not a cost savings initiative, but then a couple slides down, you talk about saving all this money that you're estimating saving. So I guess a couple questions there. What would it cost to provide this on-demand service? And can you clear my mind on it's not a cost savings, but yet you're suggesting they're going to have cost savings?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Morrow. To clarify, all of the costs of the project and the implementation of transit on-demand software technology is all the savings we've come up with are net of those costs. So That's located in, I don't have the page in front of me, but that is on, if you could just give me 1 second. That would be page 18 of the information package, which discuss the costs. And on page 17, you can see that the ongoing costs are net of the net operational savings.
Okay, I'll hop out for now, Mr. Mayor. Thank you.
Sure, if there's any further questions, Councillor Higgin?
Actually, just to add on to that, and thank you for that answer, Mr. Grieco. So the net savings, so we are actually taking what is a budgeted amount for this software, I take it, and that's part of this. So the savings that we saw, just to confirm again what you're saying, it was inclusive of actually purchasing this on-demand software already. It's not going to be, we're going to save, I can't remember what the number was, $300,000, but then we're going to spend X amount. This is already taken into account, the cost savings, or spending the money on the software, correct?
That's correct, Councillor Higgin. So how it would work, we would implement the technology. There would be a cost. Those costs are outlined on page 18.
Yeah.
But then we net those costs out with the savings that we realize through efficiencies and cost savings. So
Thank you.
all nets out.
Any further questions from council?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go ahead. And then our city manager.
Thank you.
Okay.
City manager, want to go first?
I was just going to ask Scott a question, Councillor Morrow, to maybe help bring some clarification to a question you answered, and that's this notion that on-demand transit systems have not typically been introduced to save money, although in certain situations they can. And I was going to ask Scott to maybe explain that. It might help. It might help
Yeah, I
clarify
appreciate
where
that.
they work and where they don't, from an efficiency perspective.
Thank you, Mr. City Manager.
So transit on-demand technology, it very much, you can get to the point where if you have that type of technology, you'll have too many buses on. So it's almost as though you have a diminishing return. So transit on demand will increase your ridership to the extent where you have to add on more buses. So that's why the properties that we researched, the majority of them use transit on demand to complement their existing conventional routes. It's not necessarily to replace it, and that transit on demand can actually become, if it enhances ridership, it can add costs because of those diminishing returns of having to add buses on as ridership grows.
So just on that, shouldn't we as council know that before we approve anything? What these costs are going to be?
I think that the challenge, Councillor Morrow, is it's difficult to predict, and that's why that's why the notion of a pilot, and if I understand on-demand transit, and as Scott just described it, there could come a point where, and again, if I understand where it's been implemented and used, it's largely to service less used routes in expanding or new areas, but at some point when demand reaches X in those areas, it makes sense to actually revert to a conventional route. So for where we are as a city now, given the usage in some of the areas that Scott's outlined in the presentation, it makes sense from an efficiency perspective, and we may see savings. But going forward, there may come a time where demand on some of those routes is such that on-demand transit is the more expensive option, and convention and normal routing is the least expensive. Do I understand that right, Scott?
That's perfect.
Okay, so the City Link, if I'm not mistaken, help me out here, or it would now, based on what you're suggesting, that the City Link routes, the way I understand it, would be the same or somehow connected or the same or whatever the word is to routes 23 and 24. My understanding is that routes 23 and 24 don't run on weekends or holidays. So how is that going to work together on the on-demand system, and wouldn't that be extra costs?
So all of the routes 23 and 24, all of these schedules have been provided, and those are outlaid on page 19 and 20 of the informational package. So essentially, CityLink would be running on the weekends on those Saturdays and Sundays. If we get into the 5 and 10% reduction models, that's where we would see a reduction in our overall service with the cost reduction model.
Okay, and my final question for now is, so did you or your staff actually take the buses and test the scenarios that you're presenting in front of us to make sure travel times, connections, et cetera, all that stuff works together? Or are you just hoping that this new computer on-demand software program is going to be our answer to better transit service? Did you guys actually try these routes and do what you're saying you're going to do?
We have had routing changes in the past, and we go through a number of different procedures in place, everything from designing the schedule to doing run cutting, and also safety testing all of those routes. So all of that would be done prior to any implementation of these route changes and transit on demand.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Hey, Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I apologize, Mr. Greco, if I missed this one. We've used the word pilot before at council chambers, but it has different meanings from different departments. When you say a pilot, is this a pilot in terms of bringing back evidence, data that council can make a decision to continue on? Or is this a pilot as being, this is what we're going to do, and really we're just doing it for a couple of years, we'll report back, but we're planning on continuing it?
Thank you for your question, Councillor Kaufman. So to answer that, we would bring back the results of the pilot project for further review for council, including any cost savings. And in terms of actual cost savings, we would bring all those results back to council for their review.
Okay, sorry, and again, I do apologize if I missed this. What then is the timeline on the pilot?
We feel we can gain enough information, and if we do a pilot for 1 year.
Okay, thank you. I know currently that there are some pressures on drivers in terms of completing a couple of routes, in terms of getting to and from the depot. This hopefully would alleviate that, but is there still going to be some timing pressure on a couple of the routes?
There may very well be pressure on those routes, and that's why we would do extensive research and ensure that we have proper timing for these routes, especially with respect to most of the routes are 25 minutes with a 5-minute recovery time at the end of the route. So we would make sure that we would have a successful pilot project and operationalize any changes that we had to make.
Okay, thank you. Final question. How are you planning on messaging this to the riders? I know we can do social media, we can do things of that nature, but how are we going to communicate this to the people who are actually getting on and off our buses?
Thank you for your question. We do have a line item for a marketing cost with respect to that. It is going to be some education to the customers, and that's why we've allocated some money in there for the marketing of transit on demand. So using our own internal social media, we do intend on marketing it out and making sure that customers understand it's an education thing, how to use the system. And we would be sure to help our customers in that process.
Thank you. If I can, Mayor Spearman, one more, unless there's somebody else in line.
Go ahead.
Okay, thank you. This is not purely technology-based, I'm hoping. You still have the ability to phone, just the old-fashioned phone, as I know not all our riders actually have the latest smartphone.
Excellent question. So during our transit by reservation, we started that process off with taking phone calls. We eventually added on to transit by reservation, and then we started booking those by email. And so our intention would be to accommodate as many customers as possible. So our intention would be to utilize phones, email, along with the app, so that we can accommodate all of our customer base.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mayor Spearman.
Councillor Higgin?
Just a quick question for Mr. City Manager. We were talking about the cost and how we don't know the cost, but I think we've done some research over time with other cities and other communities that are doing transit on demand. Are we using that? Is that how we kind of got the number as far as what the net result would be? Because we must have spoken with other communities, obviously, on their transit on demand, found out, their average savings or whatever, if you will. Is that how we came to that number? Do any of you know that?
I'll defer to Scott, but I would like to answer part of that and sort of spurred by a couple of previous questions. This really is a new approach. And so in terms of being on the forward edge and looking at how we can find efficiencies in transit and look to evolve our transit system, there's not a huge body of evidence to look at right now. So despite the fact that KPMG said there are some savings here, look at on-demand transit. As Scott mentioned, there aren't many properties or municipalities that have done it specifically for that reason. It's mainly been brought in for other reasons. So I think as we move down this road, we should just recognize that this truly is a pilot, and we're going to learn through this process. And whether or not it's an efficiency outcome, we realize at the end, hopefully it moves us down the road of having a more responsive and better service for citizens. But I defer to Scott on what we learned dollar-wise from other municipalities.
Yeah, the majority of municipalities we did research did not implement transit on demand for pure cost savings. And that goes back to that threshold, is that what transit on demand really did was expand ridership. They were able to go into new service areas. And so in our model, we combine transit on demand with the CityLink model, and we do see some cost savings. Some of those cost savings are from a slight reduction in service after 10. The value of transit on demand is that we can still provide the service. We're providing customers with options. And so if we have the industrial section after 7 p.m., we don't have buses that go into that area after 7. But if we were to have a transit on demand system, we would soon see that, hey, we can still pick up riders and then link them into our CityLink routes. In comparing apples to apples, we took our current service model and broke that down and basically said it's $99 an hour. If hypothetically, if we implement transit on demand with these service standards, what would our cost savings be? And that's how we derived our cost savings.
But just in closing, I think when we have the resolution, I could probably change it on the resolution or ask for the support regarding that. But is it possible, or is it too much to ask maybe Mr. City Manager or Scott to maybe have a 6-month check-in, progress report kind of on that? Because I think this is so new, right? And I think it's great what we're doing, and it would just maybe, I don't know how much could be done in 6 months, but maybe a check-in and something at that time. Is that something that we could maybe look at?
I would say if we have the data, absolutely.
Okay.
Yeah. As long as we have enough data at that point to have something meaningful for council.
And even if that's what comes back, we don't have the date or whatever, but kind of that check-in, I think. Okay. Thank you. Thank you.
Are there any further questions from council? Councillor Croson.
Yeah,
Councillor Croson?
Yep. Thank you so much, Mayor Spearman. Thank you for your presentation. I understand you have a transit advisory committee, a group of citizens who provide information and support. Have they looked at this, and what is their opinion of it?
They haven't looked at this. What we will be doing is presenting the Transit Advisory Committee with the package that we've put together for council. And so we with COVID, we haven't had the opportunity to have those meetings. one of the recommendations we will do after this presentation is reach out to our Transit Advisory Committee members so that they understand. In the past, we've always included them in terms of the Transit Master Plan, the 10-year strategic plan. We bring these concepts forward for the Transit Advisory Committee to review.
General terms of things that they're looking for, better access to transit, et cetera, does this match with what they've asked of you in the past?
This does match exactly what they've asked. The reason I say that is because through the Transit Master Plan process, we had a lot of engagement with the Transit Advisory Committee. And so there's this appetite from the members on the committee to move to more of a ridership model. This model will give us that opportunity.
Thank you.
Mr. Grieco, would this transit on-demand system work for things like special events, or should that just be handled separately? So let's say Hurricanes games. People go to the Hurricanes, they like to drink beer. If they wanted to, if you could fill a few buses after a Hurricanes game with people connecting to forget the name of the express system, but basically, would it be a way of getting people at events like that to use more transit?
It's a very good plan, actually, Mayor Spearman. So the concept I used in the presentation was an example of somebody going from North Walmart to McMaster. So in using that same example, if you lived out by Walmart North and wanted to use an on-demand service to get to CityLink and then take that CityLink, CityLink will bring you basically right to the NMAX Center. So
Awesome.
it would be a very good concept for that.
Excellent. Good. Thank you. Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm good. Thanks.
Are there any further questions from council? I see none. We'll ask our presenter to take a seat in the audience and we'll deal with the resolution. I have a resolution from Councillor Higgin, Transit on Demand. Be it resolved that City Council receive this presentation as information, and further be it resolved that City Council approve administration to 1, implement the on-demand transit with CityLink as outlined in the attached transit information package, and 2, report to Council on the on-demand transit service deliverables and outcomes 1 year after implementation. Okay, so is that going to be a friendly amendment? So
My own reso, yeah.
okay. So 6 months after implementation. And further be it resolved that Mr. Scott Grieco be thanked for his presentation. Councillor Higgin?
Mr. Mayor, and thank you very much, Mr. Grieco, for your presentation. Going back, Council requested back in June 1st of 2020 here, meeting that Lethbridge Transit return with a detailed outline and plan of on-demand transit service. Got a lot of questions around here, and I think that's probably one of the main reasons that it sounds like this is the way to go in any of your research. So it's the one reason why I had thought, well, maybe we can do it with this 6 months, get some idea what's going on during that time there, and I just missed if that would give enough time for Mr. City Manager, if just a start and see that check-in time at 6 months. So that's why I'd put in the 6 months. But open for any other debate.
Okay, any further questions from council? And I'll take that as Councillor Higgins' opening. Any debate? Councillor Crowson?
I think from my perspective, that if you bring us something that looks like it can save money, provide better access, better meet rider needs, and has better service, I'll support this. So I will be voting in favor of this. And I'm glad we're doing it as a pilot to see how it will work, because I think it will provide better service to the public. And I think this is a very good way of moving forward. Staying the same is not going to get us any better results. And so thank you very much for this. I think it's a great thing for our community.
Transit service is certainly one of the city's significant costs and one which we currently subsidize to a great extent from taxes. So I'm looking forward to any improvements, and I commend administration for their approach to innovating, providing an innovative idea to attempt to provide greater cost recovery and greater financial sustainability for our transit system. So I too will support the resolution. Any further comments from councillors? Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'd like to thank the presenter for the information provided today. I have to echo what Councillor Croson said, and I think this is a new way of doing business. We always ask administration to come up with innovative ways of providing service, and I think this is one of those ways. And as Councillor Higgins said, if we're doing a review of it at a certain point to see the effectiveness, I don't think we can ask for something better than that. So I will support this.
Any further debate from councillors? I hear none. I'll ask Councillor Higgins to close.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Once again, just thank you very much for the presentation. I'm hoping going forward, and I'm sure it'll be in the research and the planning going forward, that during some of these times that we do have, we look at what type of transportation vehicles we're going to be using as well, because there's been a lot of comment throughout the community that's saying, I've got these 40-foot limos coming through, and maybe they could have been smaller during off-peak times or whatever. So maybe it's something, but I'm sure that'll be looked at during this time. So I like the idea of a pilot project, and with the return in 6 months to kind of see how things are going. And so I would ask the council to support this.
Okay, question's been called. All in favor? Are there any opposed? So Councillor Miyashiro, Councillor Kaufman, Councillor Morrow, all in favor?
In favor.
Thank you. That's unanimous. Thank you. We'll move on to 4.2, Lethbridge Transit Accessoride Eligibility. I have a resolution from Councillor Higgins, but we'll wait till after the presentation, and we'll call forward Mr. Greco again to present to us on Lethbridge Transit Accessibility.
Mayor Spearman, just before Mr. Greco starts, I am going to declare a conflict due to a familial relationship that our family has with Accessoride. I've had technological issues all day, so if my colleagues are okay with it, I will simply leave the room, but I am going to keep the Teams meeting going if that's amenable to everybody there.
What room are you going to be going to, just so we know? Just joking.
Good one.
Maybe we don't want to know. Okay.
That's a great question. I'll email you the answer.
Okay. Mr. Greco, please proceed with your presentation on Lethbridge Transit Accessoride Eligibility. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman and members of council, for allowing us the opportunity to present today. Next. Our transit team has put together a comprehensive and thorough information package, and we trust this information will assist you with any questions you may have. The KPMG Fiscal and Operational Review was an informative process in identifying opportunities to address accessoride capacity concerns and improve our eligibility requirements for those who truly require the assistance. Next. Ultimately, we are aiming for a decision today on implementing eligibility criteria through an individual assessment by a contracted occupational therapist. Next. Let's walk through how we got here today. The City of Lethbridge took over handy bus operations in 2007. In the timeline, we highlight a significant increase in the number of rides in 2015. Accessoride responded with the addition of resources to meet the growing demand for the service in 2016 and 2018 through the N17 initiative. The Transit Master Plan process into 2017 redefined our service as transportation for people with disabilities who who cannot use conventional transit service. And so the TMP recommended implementing eligibility criteria. This same recommendation was identified by KPMG in 2019. So we find ourselves with the problem of balancing a high level of service with the need for fiscal efficiencies. Next. We know that we do not have clearly defined eligibility criteria, which has resulted in capacity challenges for Access-a-Ride, along with a limited means to limit ridership. Some of the successes transit has implemented to address efficiencies include the enforcement of no-shows, revision of the user guide, along with educating clients about accessible transit through numerous stakeholder engagements. As indicated in the KPMG report, we have double the amount of ridership than our peers. We also know through the operational review process that 18 of the 21 clients have a clearly defined eligibility criteria assessment process. Next. There are, however, some items that we don't know. We don't know the exact number of clients that would no longer be eligible. As a result of this, we don't know the projected amount of savings that eligibility criteria will provide. KPMG indicated 1.5 to 2.3 million in savings, which translates into approximately half of the current trips our service provides. Next. So what are our options? Our options are to stay status quo with capacity concerns or introduce eligibility criteria through an assessment process. Next. The analysis of our system, including the results of the TMP and the KPMG operational review, ultimately lead to eligibility criteria. Eligibility would be determined through an assessment process completed by an occupational therapist, along with a clearly defined tier system, which in turn tightens up the application process. This is our recommendation to manage capacity concerns for Access-a-Ride. Thank you for your time, Mayor Spearman and fellow members of council. I will open it up for questions.
Okay, questions from council? Councillor Higgin?
One of the biggest things that, the biggest question we had is about how we're going to work with the eligibility for Access-a-Ride, because one of the big parts that the KPMG report came back with. So with that, we've talked about an OT coming in and doing this work, and that there would not be quote-unquote grandfathering in for who's currently using. Everybody would go through that process, correct?
That's correct. Everybody would go through the same process.
Everyone that's current riders or future, just to keep the process fair, everyone would go through that.
Yeah, in order to have a fair and equitable process, all clients would be reviewed, and as well as all future clients would go through the same process.
In current clients using Access-a-Ride, what was the number again in there? Was it I want to say
1,200.
It's estimated between 11 and 1,200. I don't have that number right in front of me, but
Okay.
It's somewhere in there.
And do you know happen to know what timeline this would take? How much time to figure out the criteria and to have that occupational therapist meet with each of these individuals? A couple hours?
Yes, it would be approximately 2 hours per client, and I believe, is it 1 year that we're listening? Sorry?
So I'm just wondering if we can invite you up just to the mic here, just so those online can hear. If that's all right, Mayor?
Yeah.
Is that okay?
Yeah, please come up.
Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. My name is Michelle Loxton. I'm the Specialized Transit System Operations Supervisor. And what we found was that it is 2 hours per assessment. We did all of that research through an occupational therapist and utilizing one occupational therapist with our current numbers, which is 1,173, which varies day to day, would take approximately 1 year.
Okay, so that's how it came to the 2342 hours, I think that was put in there somewhere as far, that was 2 hours per.
That's man hours, yes.
Now, thank you very much for that answer. A question I have for Mr. Greco, or I'm not sure who could answer this, is it more beneficial to have multiple occupational therapists rather than one to go through that 1 year, just so that the process is done quicker and the realizations from that KPMG recommendations would come a little bit quicker?
We certainly could use more than one, which would absolutely shorten up that time.
Okay, thank you very much for that answer. Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'd like to thank the presenter once again. My question was more along the line of what Councillor Higgins just asked about hours to complete the assessment. And certainly with 1,200 people and you're looking at over a year for one person to do the assessment. So glad to hear that you said you're open to having more than one OT work on the assessments and to get this done more quickly. Thank you. That was it.
Okay, Councillor Campbell.
Thanks for the presentation. I'm just wondering about the criteria and when that's established, and if there's someone who's sort of just on the on the edge that they don't qualify, what kind of hardships will they have to endure? What will there be their alternatives that they can't take Access-a-Ride? Do you have any sense of that?
So we don't know the exact impacts, but to answer that question is any client who would not be eligible for the service would be deemed eligible for conventional accessible transit. So all of our transit buses are equipped with 2 wheelchair positions. Every single bus kneels. Every single transit bus has a ramp. As well, the buses are equipped with what they call stop enunciation, which gives visual cues, as well as so anybody with any hearing or visual impairments would be able to utilize conventional transit. It should also be noted that we have an accessible bus stop contractor that they basically do snow removal as well. So all of our stops the majority of our stops are accessible. I can't say all, but we're working towards achieving every single bus stop as being accessible, but certainly all of our transit buses are 100% accessible.
Very good, thank you.
Councillor Higgin.
I just wanted to ask again here, back in June, I had this question here, and I just wanted to make sure, and we had a discussion here last week, and I appreciate that, regarding the occupational therapist, their word as opposed to a doctor's note that someone is going to bring and say, listen, I've got this doctor's note. I just want to hear a little bit more about that. This is the line of work, obviously, that the occupational therapist is in and does it on a regular basis, from what I understand. Could you please just kind of give some background to, a conversation that we had about that, if you could?
You bet. I'm going to defer the question to Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Higgin. So through our research, we did research actually with occupational therapists, and they are specially trained to do these sorts of assessments, where a medical doctor has different training, right? So they go to school, actually, university, for a full year, and I also attached that in the information package. So you had the opportunity to review that. I believe that is on page. It's in there.
Yeah.
There's a link in there that you can click on, and we actually researched that.
That's
and
just
found-
mainly for community as well to know that
That
are,
is,
that are.
absolutely, yes. They are trained specifically to do cognitive and physical assessments to ensure people get their needs met.
And to follow up to that, to our city solicitor, if I could, Mayor Spearman, do you know of any challenge that could come from that? If we've got an occupational therapist and someone comes with a doctor's note, who overrules who, or is that something that we'll deal with when the time comes? Or do you have any information on that? And I'm sorry, I should have asked you prior. It just came up here now as.
No, it's an excellent question. I think the specifics of what would happen would really become very fact dependent. And what often happens, whether you're talking in any kind of duel between experts, the first step is making sure that both experts had access to the exact same information. So as we develop a policy and procedures for how that goes, I assume there may be some, what do you disagree with the OT, and how often can you be reassessed, and how do we deal with people fairly? And we'd have to deal with that. But at the end of the day, from a legal perspective, in determining these kinds of things, which are not that different from workplace accommodation situations, it's generally recognized that an occupational therapist has the right training to understand functional requirements for a physical task.
I appreciate that, because that was the question that I had, and I appreciate those answers. Thank you.
So I just want to emphasize, when we've looked at other communities in Alberta that provide an accessoride type service, we're one of the few that doesn't require the pre-screening and assessment by occupational therapists. That correct? I think I saw a number that we're one of only two that does not require.
Yeah, so out of 21 properties, we are one of 3 that doesn't have any formal eligibility criteria process. So
The other 18 all do.
that's correct.
This will bring us basically into alignment with what other providers in other communities are already doing.
Absolutely.
Thank you. Are there any further questions from council?
I do, Mr. Mayor.
Okay.
Joe.
Go ahead, Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I think I read somewhere in the package that we were presented that in June of 2018, there was a health check or something like that was done with our current scheduling and booking software program. And I think in November of that same year, the findings of that health check were implemented by staff, measuring efficiencies and those sorts of things. What was the outcome of that implementation, and what efficiencies were realized, and was there any service improvement? Do you recall that?
Yes, excellent question, Councillor Morrow. Thank you for your question. So yes, we did implement what they call the health check. That came with a number of recommendations that we do to our system. And we have put in, I'm just going to have my colleague Michelle pull up the page number of everything that we implemented with the health check. In terms of helping us out with our efficiencies, that's on page 163 of the information package. So we have implemented all the majority of the recommendations that health check recommended that we do.
Okay, so, but we still need more, obviously, or what we're not, it hasn't been efficient then, or what? Like, I'm trying to figure out if those were all implemented, why are we dealing with whatever it is we're dealing with today?
Well, the health check system we included in the informational package just to demonstrate some of the items that we have done for successes in trying to find these efficiencies. So we're here today to, I guess, focus on eligibility eligibility criteria. So we did include that in the package as part of us being able to demonstrate our working towards being more efficient.
But if I could just
Okay,
add to that.
Yeah.
Just briefly, so in light of the changes that have been made to date, we're here today to address that specific question about accessibility criteria and the process for determining, eligibility criteria and the process for assessing eligibility. What KPMG found, again, when compared to peer municipalities, we were, as mentioned earlier, double the usage level. And no matter what we do to sort of tinker with efficiency internally, it all comes back to that not having criteria and not assessing against those criteria. And that's the same recommendation that came out of the Transit Master Plan review of a few years ago. So we can do as much as we can internally, but at some point, we're really not going to be able to achieve the efficiency levels or be in the same sort of ballpark as our peer municipalities unless we implement eligibility criteria and assess potential clients. So that's why we're here today, to see if council supports doing that or not.
Okay, thank you. Do we know how many, do we have a number of how many actual rides we have per year rather than riders or customers or clients?
Pages of that.
So on page 49, we do have of the information package. That's where we show the ridership. And so in 2018, for example, we were just under 130,000 trips. In 2019, we were slightly fewer trips at 122,000.
Thanks for that. I missed that. Now, Mr. Greco, you said, I think I heard you correctly, that you don't know the eligibility criteria. I want to make sure that you said that, correct?
To be clear, what I'm trying to refer to in my presentation is we don't know what the impact will be. We don't know the actual cost savings. We know that eligibility criteria will be the same across the board for all of our applicants, but what we don't know is the actual cost savings, because we don't know whether or not clients are going to be eligible for the service or not.
Yeah, no, I understand that. I guess maybe let me ask, what I'm trying to get at, where I'm going with my questioning. So we don't know the eligibility criteria. We don't know what it's going to be. We don't know what the future accessor ride will look like and who's going to be able to get on it based on the eligibility criteria. So where I'm going with this is, shouldn't we know that first? Because when I read the resolution, it says develop eligibility criteria for accessor ride programs, contract the appropriate service to manage, and then point 3, report to council on the accessor ride outcomes for 1 year. What I'm trying to get, I'm a little confused. Wouldn't we have the eligibility criteria first, and then by having that and establishing that, we will then know how many riders meet that criteria and would be able to access accessor ride?
I'm going to
trying to understand that.
I'm going to defer the question to Michelle. Or
Thank you, Councillor Morrow. If I could just, perhaps I want to make sure that I'm clear with your question. So what I heard is you're asking more with respect to the clearly defined eligibility criteria. Is that what you're asking?
Well, maybe I should even ask Councillor Higgin, because it's his resolution. When I read the resolution and I see point 1 and 2, that clearly seems to me that we're trying to create an eligibility, criteria, and we're going to contract the appropriate service to manage that, and then from there we move forward. But then part 3 says that we're going to actually continue on with accessor ride without right now even knowing the eligibility criteria. I'm a little confused at what we're trying to do here.
May I explain what we're hoping for here? So, so what we'd like to do is enhance our eligibility criteria so that it's very clear using a tier system. So that would be, there would be some unconditional, there would be unconditional, conditional, and temporary eligibility within this, or ineligible, which is found on page 42 of the information package. And so utilizing that, the occupational therapist would then assess people to see where they fit. So if they certainly have, if they then are assessed and they're unconditional, those people truly are unable to ride conventional transit, meaning they have higher needs, and they would then be eligible for accessoride. People who perhaps were ineligible, those are the people who are able to ride conventional transit, so they would be on conventional fixed routes, which again is accessible, and that's how that would go. Is that making more sense to you? Is that clearing things up?
I understand that. Thank you. No, I guess where I'm missing is, as of right now, as we hear this presentation, do we have any criteria that we can move forward? Or sounds to me that we're going to make this decision without having the criteria in front of us, and we'll know the criteria 1 year from now. To me, that's kind of backwards. You would think we would have the criteria presented to council in front of us today as part of this resolution, so that at least we know what it is that we're, you know, where we're going. Whereas I see this backwards. Do you understand what I'm trying to say?
Yes, I think city manager's going
to.
Like,
let me. We don't have any criteria as of right now. Is that correct?
We have very limited criteria. What we're asking is that we get an enhanced, clearly defined tier system. So that's on page 42, and that is what we're talking about. And then the OT would then determine where they fit within that criteria. So they would assess, and then they would decide through the assessment process where those people actually fit and where their needs are going to be met.
Mr. Mayor, thank you. I'll hop out for now and let others in. Thanks.
If I could add, hopefully, maybe just jump in and not try and add confusion to this, but the actual criteria, there are a number of standard tests used by occupational therapists to assess individuals for access to a variety of programs, whether that be long-term care, home care, accessibility support programs. And those are pretty standard tools, assessment tools that are widely recognized that focus on cognitive ability and mobility. And so those are the types of tools, or that's the type of tool or assessment that we would see developed and applied, not a particular Lethbridge City tool. This is this tool to be applied by an OT would be one of the standard accepted assessment tools for determining whether or not somebody met the needs to have access to this service. I don't know if that helps.
Councillor Croson?
Yeah.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you for the presentation and for the work. I would assume that eligibility criteria is being developed by administration to keep politics out of it and not by council. So I follow up on the earlier question, and that was a rhetorical question. I don't need an answer.
Well, I know it's rhetorical, but maybe for my own, just so I understand that the criteria that we're speaking about, the eligibility criteria, are not going to be made up unless I've missed the boat here somewhere. We're simply going to bring a tool to the table which isn't there now, which other municipalities apply. And that's
where I'm following through.
That's get licensed OTs who do this work for a living to apply that tool to determine whether or not an individual has needs that would require them to access accessibility.
No, I'm in complete agreement with that. I'm saying we don't need to see them now to make a decision, because then if we make a decision based on the criteria, it's a political decision rather than administrative.
But my understanding is the question that we need to understand from a council perspective is, are the standards that are going to be applied, are they going to be consistent with those standards that are used in other municipalities? Are they going to be I'm not going to ask if they're going to be weaker or stronger. Are they going to be consistent? And if they are, that's all I need to know.
Yes, and they'd be consistent with industry standards. They'd be the industry tools developed to make exactly these types of decisions.
Right. I'm not an occupational therapist. I'm not going to be able to judge whether the standards are appropriate. But if they're consistent, that's all I need to know. Yeah, thank you. Any further questions from council?
Yeah, Mr. Mayor.
Okay, go ahead, Councillor Morrow.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. So, Mr. City Manager, does that mean we will be hiring occupational therapists, or who's going to be doing that for us?
So the same process would be consistent. We would put out a request for proposal. We put out an RFP, and we would choose an occupational therapist that would perform those assessments for us.
And be employed by the City of Lethbridge forever?
No, it would be a contract occupational therapist.
Okay, and my final question, let's see, I had a bunch of them here. So based on your research, and I think maybe the mayor might have touched on this, based on your research, so we obviously have an idea what the industry practice is or what they're doing for eligibility screening. I'm assuming we're going to follow that or go along with what the industry has been doing as far as establishing criteria.
Yes, absolutely, that's correct. And again, just to reemphasize those numbers, so 18 of the 21 properties that we researched have a process, and we would be using a contract occupational therapist to perform those assessments for us.
Okay, and my final question, if I may, Councillor Higgin in the last resolution decided to change the resolution from 1 year to 6 months. Would we be able to do the same for this one?
He's already done that change, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Okay. Are there any further questions from council? If not, we'll ask our presenters to take seats in the audience while we deal with the resolution. Thank you. I have a resolution from Councillor Higgin, Lethbridge Transit Accessoride eligibility. Be it resolved that City Council receive this presentation as information. And further be it resolved that City Council approve administration to develop eligibility criteria for accessoride programs. 2, contract the appropriate service to manage the eligibility process. And 3, report to Council on the accessoride outcomes 6 months after implementation. And further be it resolved that Mr. Scott Greco be thanked for his presentation. Councillor Higgin?
Thank you, Mayor Spearman, and yes, thank you very much for your presentation. Council, again, going back to the June 1st meeting, we asked that Transit would return with recommendations determining accessoride eligibility. We've had multiple questions. Thank you for the answers. We've had a lot of great questions, and I think they're important to ask as we definitely need to know more about this program and how we can make it better. So with that, I'll open it up for any other debate.
Any debate from councillors? I will be supporting the resolution. I think when 18 other communities are using an assessment criteria, I think Lethbridge needs to do the same. So we need to make sure that services are provided to the correct people, and we need to make sure everyone has access to a form of transit that gets them around the city. So I will be supporting this resolution. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. I'd like to thank the accessory staff again for their presentation and my colleague for this resolution. As some of you may know, I worked in the disability sector for a number of years, and one of the things that we did talk about often was was criteria for people on accessory because there were certain bottlenecks, and obviously you see by the data provided to us that 33% of the rides are to programs. And so if we can change some of the criteria and maybe get some of those, the people receiving services in the agencies to use regular transit if they can, or alternative transit, then I believe it'll help make the system more efficient and run more smoothly. So I will support this.
Any further comments? If not, I'll ask Councillor Higgin to close.
Thank you. I just wanted to thank again the presenters and appreciate the answers to the questions. And it's been a long time coming here, and I'm glad that we're taking some of this advice from the KPMG report and moving on it and making sure that it's done in a fair and equitable way. And so with that, I'll ask for council support.
Question's been called. All in favor? Councillor Miyashiro in favor?
In favor.
Councillor Morrow?
In favor.
And Councillor Kaufman has declared a conflict of interest, so it's unanimous. Thank you. Okay, it's 3:30. Does council want to take a 10-minute break before the next presentation? Yes, no? One more presentation, go ahead.
Your Worship, I believe the presenters had to leave. They had to pick up some children at school, so they asked that their presentation be postponed to a later date.
Another date. Okay.
This should be referred to the Agenda Review Committee for their consideration.
All right. So there are no presenters for 4.3. So was a lady from the U of A, is she gone as well? Okay. And Alberta Health Services? Okay. Well, that's unfortunate. So 4.3 will come back to another date. There are no submissions. There is an official business resolution, 6.1, which I will read. I have an official business resolution from Councillor Croson, Sisters in Spirit Proclamation 2020. Whereas at the City Council meeting of January the 11th, 1999, City Council passed a resolution stating the Mayor's office would discontinue the long-standing practice of issuing proclamations. And whereas the passing of the resolution in 1999 was to avoid endorsements for a cause or program or controversy in the community. And whereas the current City Council requests an exception to the resolution passed at that time, and whereas Lethbridge City Council is continuing to work to build relationships with the Indigenous community, and whereas for 14 years a collaboration of Lethbridge organizations and individuals have organized and planned a Sisters in Spirit Vigil, and whereas the Sisters in Spirit Vigil honors the lives of missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls, supports grieving families, and provides opportunities for healing, and is a movement for social change, encouraging education and understanding relating to missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited persons. And whereas an official proclamation from City Council in this matter would help to continue to build relationships and show support for Indigenous women and girls in Lethbridge and area, therefore be it resolved that City Council directs the Mayor's office as a one-time exception to issue and declare a proclamation proclaiming October the 4th as Sisters in Spirit Day. Councillor Croson.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. And thank you to the members of the Sisters in Spirit Committee, those who are able to join us today. I was asked to bring this forward on their behalf, as Sisters in Spirit is organized by a group of community members. The vigil this year is October 4th, and of course it is, as noted in the resolution, to educate people, to help them understand missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls and two-spirited persons, and to hopefully, finally, make changes so that as a community and as a country, we can move forward together. This is the 14th year in Lethbridge. Of course, this also occurs in communities across the country every year. And what the committee is looking for is a proclamation from council to show their support for the vigil, for the day, and for the work being done. And so I will start open with that and see if there are any questions from my colleagues.
Okay, Councillor Higgin.
Thank you very much, Councillor Crozan. I just have a question here. A one-time exception proclaiming October 4th, that would be 2020, then I take it, as Sisters in Spirit Day?
That's the date this year, yes.
Is that's so it's not October 4th every year, it's for this particular year for now, for the one time?
The date changes, but I also understand when the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls recommendations come back from the Reconciliation Committee, they will be asking for it to be permanent, but this is for this 1 year at this point.
This is the one, okay, so the October 4th, 2020. Would you be fine for a friendly amendment, just so there's no confusion there, or?
Sure.
Okay, thank you.
So we'll amend the resolution to say October the 4th, 2020. Are there any further questions from council? Okay, we'll move on to debate. Is Councillor Kaufman back? He's back.
Yes, I am. Councillor Crozan was kind enough to send me an email to let me know they were done.
Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, on to debate, Councillor Crozan.
Well, as I said, I'm bringing this forward on the Sisters in Spirit Committee, and I asked them if they would prepare for me some words. Following our procedure, they knew that I would be the one who'd have to bring the resolution forward, but I wanted to have their words here today. And Tanya Pace-Crosschild was kind enough to put together a statement for me about why this is so important. So I just want to read you her words. Indigenous women are the heart of their communities. Our mothers, grandmothers, aunties, sisters, and daughters are sacred. By proclaiming October 4th as Sisters in Spirit Day, Lethbridge acknowledges the ongoing violence and genocide that affects Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited persons across Turtle Island. By proclaiming this day for the MMIWG2S, it raises public awareness and creates the allyship that we so desperately need to combat this ongoing violence, assault, and genocide that continues against our Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirits. Let's put Lethbridge on the map for the leadership in human rights and offer that dignity to the Indigenous women by proclaiming October 4th as the Sisters in Spirit Day, acknowledging missing and murdered Indigenous women, girls, and two-spirited people, and the fight to end this epidemic of extreme violence. Other members of the committee were kind enough to also share with me some things that they have experienced and wanted to let you know as you're thinking about this. Marissa was kind enough to tell me about her first day on a new job here in Lethbridge. She was actually congratulated by one of the other staff on getting the position and told her that her people sure have come a long way. She was openly asked, how did you overcome your alcohol problems and what helped you to be so normal? Those are unfortunately some of the experiences that some of our Indigenous residents experience on an ongoing basis. And I am hoping my colleagues can support me in this proclamation as a reminder that we need action and we need to have allyship. This proclamation is a promise to the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls. We haven't forgotten them. They matter, and they mattered then, and they still matter, and they are important members of our community. And this proclamation will be an affirmation to the Indigenous community that we hear their message, we care, and we are all working together on this. So I will ask my colleagues for support on this.
Thank you for your opening. Councillor Miyashiro.
Thank you, Mayor Spearman. Thank you, Councillor Crozan, for bringing this forward. I think it's appropriate that council supports this for everything that Councillor Crozan said about developing a more positive relationship with the Indigenous community. This is something that I will stand behind and I will support.
Thank you. Deputy Mayor Kaufman.
I didn't think I was in the queue, but I will definitely support this motion as well. Just a reminder to my colleagues that we have sponsored 2 motions, one to AUMA and one to FCM, both around the missing and murdered Indigenous women and girls investigation by RCMP and the national inquiry around it. So this is very consistent with the position that council has already taken, and I will vote in favor of the motion.
Thank you. I too will support the motion. I believe it's important, and I think it's related to and linked to our reconciliation process, which is a key strategic direction of City Council, and understanding some of the cultural issues that have occurred over time. The fact that many murdered and missing women and girls, and it really hadn't been an issue until it became, until this movement started. These people quietly disappeared. They never had justice served, and the fact that we continue to recognize it and issue a proclamation gives respect to those people and does tell them that they haven't been forgotten, and tells their families that their loved ones haven't been forgotten. And for those reasons, I will be supporting this resolution. Councillor Campbell?
And just to add, thank you for the emotional statements. That really has an impact on me. Probably one of the easiest votes I've ever made on council. I will absolutely be supporting. Thank you.
Any further comments from councillors? I'll ask Councillor Crowson to close.
Thank you. Instead of continuing the debate, I'll just use this closing as a reminder that it is October 4th. It's a Sunday evening. And there will be, depending on how things change over the next month, the vigil will be in person, but also a virtual aspect. So anybody who cannot show up in person will be able to watch it online as well. So that social distancing and everything can be maintained, and proper masking will be there as well. I know there's been discussions about making sure masks are available. So if you have attended in the past, please do so again, whether it's virtual or not. And if you've never attended, please take the time to learn more about Sisters in Spirit, about the issue that's being discussed, and I will simply call the question.
Question has been called. All in favor? Councillor Miyashiro?
In favor.
Councillor Kaufman?
Getting to the microphone, yes, in favor.
Councillor Morrow?
In favor.
Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you. We'll now move on to council inquiries. Any inquiries from council? Council updates. I have one. We did have a joint meeting with representatives of the Kainai Council, and several members of the Lethbridge City Council attended as well on Thursday, August the 27th. The topics that we discussed were the COVID update. We talked about anti-racism and the current Mount Royal University study and the consultation process that took place at Lethbridge City Hall on July the 17th. Important to our to both councils, and certainly from the Kainai Council perspective, is the development of a memorandum of understanding between our councils. So they would like work to continue on a memorandum of understanding between our two councils, and that is a key strategy for them and should be for us. They talked about sheltering and the challenges they have of housing and appropriate housing for Indigenous people, both in the city and on the reserve, and talked about the possibility of working together to address strategies with respect to sheltering. They're very interested in our reconciliation week that will take place from September 21st to September 28th, and understanding the progress that that's happening in Lethbridge. This is now the 4th year of reconciliation in Lethbridge, and Reconciliation Week is a time when we celebrate advancements in terms of respect and understanding between Indigenous people and non-Indigenous people. So those were the key topics. I think it was a very positive meeting. Mr. Dalton attended, Councillors Crowson and Kaufman and Miyashiro attended, and from the Kainai, from the Blood Tribe Council, Hank Shade attended, and Martin Heavyhead, and Certainly our Assistant Pam Blood in the audience provided support, and Mr. Dalton and his counterpart, Mr. Rick Soup, were also participating. And Councillor Lance Tailfeathers attended, and one more, Roger, can't remember Roger's last name, but also attended. But certainly lots of interest and a strong desire to meet again and continue to make progress and work together as councils. Are there any other council updates? We certainly thank anyone who has supplied letters of support for ambulance dispatch, those from the city. We'll be meeting with the health minister on September the 24th on that issue, and I'll be meeting together with the mayors of Calgary, Red Deer, and Wood Buffalo. And with that, I have a resolution from Councillor Morrow for a closed meeting omnibus motion, 10.1, 10.2, 10.3, and 10.4. Be it resolved that Council direct that the closed meeting discussions, reports, presentations, and documents with respect to City Council boards, commissions, and committees, operational review update, community well-being and safety strategy update, and encampments and social issues remain confidential pursuant to sections 19, confidential evaluations, 23, local public body confidences, 24, advice from officials, 25, harmful to economic interests of a public body, and 27, privileged legal information of the Freedom of Information and Protection of Privacy Act. Councillor Morrow?
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? There are none. And finally, I have a resolution from Councillor Campbell, adjournment, that we do now adjourn the regular meeting of City Council until September 21st, 2020. Councillor Campbell?
Question.
Question's been called. All in favor? Any opposed? Council meeting's adjourned.